Blood dripped from the hem of a frayed pink dress, staining the polished marble of the royal council chamber. That was what silenced the room, not the intrusion, but the sheer, horrifying contrast of a bruised 4-year-old girl standing amidst the most lethal predators in North America. She didn't look at the armed guards rushing toward her. She didn't look at the snarling advisors. With eyes swollen from crying, she looked straight at the man on the obsidian throne, the Alpha King, Dominic Blackwood. Her voice was a shattered whisper that echoed like a thunderclap. "Please, Mr. King, the bad man. He won't stop hurting Mommy. He said he's going to kill her." The date was November 14th. Outside the heavy oak doors of the Blackwood estate, a torrential storm was hammering the Pacific Northwest. Inside, the atmosphere was even colder. Alpha King Dominic Blackwood sat at the head of the mahogany table, rubbing his temples. The Council of 12 was arguing about territory lines and trade routes, a droning noise that made Dominic's wolf pace restlessly beneath his skin. At 32, Dominic was the most feared alpha in the hemisphere. He was a billionaire in the human world and a god in the shifter world. He had everything: power, wealth, fear, except a reason to care about any of it. He had been cold since the day his fated mate disappeared 5 years ago, leaving a hole in his chest that no amount of violence or whiskey could fill. The southern borders are vulnerable. Alpha, Councilman Cale was saying, pointing at a map. If we don't increase the patrols, boom. The heavy double doors at the end of the hall didn't just open, they were shoved slightly ajar, struggling against the wind pressure from the storm outside, before a small body squeezed through the gap. Silence descended instantly. It wasn't an assassin. It wasn't a rogue wolf. It was a human child. Or at least, she smelled human. She was soaking wet, her hair plastered to her skull, shivering so violently her teeth chattered audibly in the cavernous room. She wore a thin, dirty pink dress and oversized rain boots. Halt a perimeter guard, a massive wolf named Gregor, stepped forward, his hand reaching for the stun baton on his belt. "How did a human child get past the gate?" The girl flinched, raising her tiny hands to cover her face, a reflex that made Dominic's stomach turn. That was a learned reaction. She expected to be hit. "Get her out of here," Kyle snapped, annoyed. "We are in session." Gregor reached out to grab the girl's arm. "Don't touch her." The voice didn't come from the girl. It came from the throne. Dominic didn't shout, but his alpha command rolled through the room like a shockwave. Gregor froze, his hand inches from the child. Every wolf in the room bared their necks instinctively. Dominic stood up. He was 6'4", built like a tank, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than most people's houses. He walked down the steps of the dais, the sound of his dress shoes sharp against the stone floor. He stopped 2 feet from the girl. Up close, the damage was worse. There was a bruise blooming across her jawline. Her knees were scraped raw. She smelled of rain, fear, and Vanilla. Dominic frowned. That scent. Vanilla and rain. It hit him like a physical blow, unlocking a memory he had buried deep in the recesses of his mind. He crouched down, ignoring the gasp of the council members. An Alpha King never knelt. "What is your name, little one?" Dominic asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. The girl lowered her hands slowly. Her eyes were a striking, impossible shade of violet. Dominic's breath hitched. He had only seen those eyes on one other person in his life. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily," Dominic repeated, testing the name. "How did you get here?" "Lily. I crawled under the fence where the big dogs play," she stammered. She was talking about the perimeter wolves. The fact that they hadn't torn her apart was a miracle or destiny. "I ran all the way from the trailers." "Why?" Lily sniffled, a fresh tear tracking through the dirt on her cheek. "Because Mummy said if I was ever in big trouble, I should find the king. She said he lives in the castle on the hill." Dominic felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Who is your mother?" "Sarah," Lily sobbed. "Her name is Sarah." The world stopped. Sarah. 5 years ago. Sarah Miller had been a human waitress at a diner Dominic owned. They had fallen into a whirlwind romance that defied all laws of the pack. She was his fated mate, he knew it, even if she was human. But then, one day, she had vanished. No note, no trace. His trackers said she had taken a bus out of state. He thought she had rejected him. Terrified of his wolf nature. "Where is Sarah now?" Dominic's voice dropped an octave, his eyes flashing gold. "The bad man." Lily began to hyperventilate. "Gareth, he's in the trailer. He has a bat. He said I have to go out so he can teach Mummy a lesson. Mummy screamed for me to run." She grabbed Dominic's expensive lapel with her muddy fingers. "Please, he's going to break her." Dominic didn't think. He didn't assess the political ramifications. He didn't consult his advisors. He roared. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage that shattered the windows of the council chamber. "Cale!" Dominic barked, standing up, lifting Lily effortlessly into his arms. "Get the SUV, now. Alpha, the session." "The session is over," Dominic snarled, striding toward the door, holding the little girl against his chest. "If anyone touches a hair on this child's head, I will rip their throat out. We are going to the Fringe. Tonight. Heads are going to roll." The Fringe was the stain on the Blackwood Pack's reputation. It was a slum located on the very edge of the territory, a place where rogues, half-breeds, and destitute humans lived in squalor. Dominic hadn't set foot there in a decade. He paid people to manage it. Clearly, they had failed. The black-armored SUV tore down the muddy, unpaved road of Sector 4, splashing through potholes, deep enough to swallow a sedan. Rain lashed against the bulletproof glass. Inside, Lily was wrapped in Dominic's suit jacket, sipping a warm bottle of water Kyle had produced from the emergency kit. She was still shaking. "Is he a monster?" Lily asked, looking up at Dominic. "Who? Gareth?" Dominic's jaw tightened. "No, sweetheart. Monsters are things people make up to scare children. Gareth is just a man. And I am the king of monsters. Turn here." Lily pointed a trembling finger toward a cluster of rusted mobile homes surrounded by overgrown weeds and piles of trash. The convoy screeched to a halt in front of a trailer that looked like a stiff wind would knock it over. The windows were boarded up with plywood, even through the drumming rain and the sealed car. Dominic's enhanced hearing picked it up immediately. Thud. A woman's cry. Stifled. Pain-filled. "No. Gareth. Please, I don't have it." Smack. "You think I care?" "Sarah. You think because you worked for the Highborns once, you're better than me." A male voice. Slurred. Drunk. Dominic didn't wait for the car to stop completely. He kicked the door open, ignoring the rain soaking his white dress shirt. Kyle and 2 other enforcers scrambled to keep up, weapons drawn. But Dominic was already moving with supernatural speed. He reached the metal door of the trailer. It was locked. Dominic didn't bother with the handle. He planted a front kick squarely on the center of the door. The metal buckled. The hinges screamed, and the entire door flew inward, crashing into the opposite wall of the cramped living room. The scene inside was a nightmare painted in dim yellow light. The trailer smelled of stale beer, mold, and fresh blood. Furniture was overturned. In the center of the room, a large, heavy-set man, Gareth, was standing over a woman curled into a fetal ball on the linoleum floor. He was holding a heavy wooden baseball bat. The woman, Sarah, was unrecognizable from the vibrant, laughing girl Dominic remembered. She was thin, her clothes were torn, and her face was a mask of blood and bruises. One of her eyes was swollen shut. Gareth spun around, stumbling, the bat raised. Who the hell? He stopped when he saw the golden eyes glowing in the doorway. He stopped when he saw the sheer size of the man standing there, radiating an aura of death so potent it made the air heavy. You, Dominic whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a sentence. Look, man, this is private property, Gareth stammered, the alcohol in his system suddenly evaporating in the face of primal fear. He didn't recognize the king, but he recognized an alpha. She's my old lady. She owes me money. Dominic stepped into the room. The floorboards groaned under his weight. She owes you nothing. Sarah stirred on the floor. She coughed, blood spattering the linoleum. She squinted through her swollen eye. Dom! She rasped. Her voice was broken, filled with disbelief. Dom, is that you? Hearing her voice snapped the last thread of Dominic's control. Gareth, sensing he was cornered, made the worst mistake of his life. He swung the bat at Dominic's head. It moved in slow motion for the Alpha King. Dominic caught the bat mid-swing with one hand. The wood cracked under his grip. He stared into Gareth's eyes, showing zero emotion. You touched what is mine, Dominic said. With a flick of his wrist, he wrenched the bat from Gareth's grip and snapped it over his knee like a twig. Before Gareth could scream, Dominic's hand was around his throat. He lifted the 250-pound man off the ground as if he weighed nothing. Kyle, Dominic said calmly, not looking away from the man gasping for air in his grip. Yes, Alpha. The head enforcer stepped into the trailer, gun lowered but ready. Take this trash outside, Dominic ordered, his voice devoid of mercy. I don't want his blood near her. Make sure he never draws breath in my city again. Make it slow. With pleasure, Alpha. Kyle and the guards dragged the kicking, screaming Gareth out into the rain. Dominic didn't watch. He dropped to his knees beside Sarah. He reached out, his hands trembling. He was afraid to touch her, afraid he might shatter her. Sarah, he choked out. She flinched as his hand hovered near her face. That flinch broke his heart into 1,000 pieces. I'm not him, Dominic whispered, tears mingling with the rain on his face. I'm not him. Sarah, it's me. It's Dom. She looked at him, her good eye widening. She reached up a bloody hand and touched his cheek. You came, she whispered, her voice fading. You actually came. I'm here. I've got you. Lily. Panic flared in her eyes. She's safe. She's in the car. She was so brave. Sarah, she saved you. Sarah let out a breath that sounded like a rattle. She's yours. Dom. She's yours. Her eyes rolled back, and her body went limp in his arms. Sarah. Dominic roared. Medic, get the medic in here now. He scooped her up, cradling her against his chest, heedless of the blood soaking his shirt. As he carried her out of the trailer, stepping over the shattered door, he saw Lily watching from the car window. He held Sarah tighter. He had lost her once. He would burn the entire world to ash before he lost her again. The private wing of St. Jude's Royal Hospital was usually a place of quiet, sterile efficiency, reserved for the injuries of the Pack's elite. Tonight, it was a war zone. Dominic Blackwood, the Alpha King, paced the hallway like a caged tiger. His charcoal suit was ruined, the white shirt beneath stained with the blood of the woman he loved. Every nurse and doctor who scurried past gave him a wide berth, terrified by the palpable waves of pheromones rolling off him, a mix of aggressive protectiveness and sheer, unadulterated panic. He hadn't let go of Sarah's hand until they wheeled her into surgery. The image of her limp hand slipping from his grasp burned in his mind. Sitting on a plastic chair near the vending machine was Lily. The little girl looked tiny in the harsh, fluorescent lights. She was still wrapped in Dominic's massive suit jacket, the sleeves hanging past her hands. She was staring at her swinging feet, her violet eyes wide and unblinking. She hadn't spoken a word since they left the trailer. Dominic stopped pacing. He took a deep breath, forcing his wolf to recede. He couldn't scare her. She was the only piece of Sarah he had right now. He walked over and knelt in front of her. "Lily," he asked softly. She looked up. "Is Mommy dead?" The question was so blunt, so devoid of the childish innocence a 4-year-old should have, that it felt like a knife in Dominic's gut. "No," Dominic said firmly. "Mommy is strong. The doctors are fixing her." "Gareth said he would kill her next time," Lily whispered, picking at a loose thread on the jacket. "He said nobody cares about trash like us." Dominic reached out, hesitating before placing a large, warm hand on her knee. "Gareth was a liar, and he is gone. You are not trash. Lily, do you know who I am?" Lily tilted her head. "You're the king, the Wolf King." "I am," Dominic nodded. "And do you know what that makes you?" She shook her head. "It means you are a princess," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. "And nobody hurts a princess." Before Lily could respond, the double doors of the surgical wing swung open. A man in green scrubs walked out, pulling down his mask. It was Dr. Aris, the pack's chief medical officer and one of the few men Dominic trusted implicitly. Dominic was on his feet in a blur of motion. "Report, Doctor." Aris looked exhausted. He glanced at Lily, then back to Dominic. "She's stable, Alpha, but it was close, too close. The damage: 3 broken ribs, a fractured ulna, severe concussion, and significant internal bruising." Aris listed the injuries clinically, though his eyes showed sympathy. "But, Alpha, that's not the worst of it." Dominic's growl was low, vibrating in his chest. "What could be worse than that? We ran a full blood panel, standard procedure for surgery." Aris lowered his voice, stepping closer to Dominic. "We found traces of wolfsbane and silver nitrate in her system." Dominic froze. The air in the hallway dropped 10 degrees. Silver and wolfsbane were poisons used to weaken shifters. But Sarah was human, or so he thought. Why would she have shifter poisons in her blood? Dominic demanded. "That's just it," Aris said, handing Dominic a clipboard. "She isn't entirely human. Dominic, the tests show she carries a dormant recessive gene. It's rare, but it happens. She's a latent shifter. She never shifted because her wolf was suppressed. But someone has been dosing her with suppressants heavy ones for years. Long-term exposure to that kind of toxicity. It's been making her weak, keeping her docile. It's a miracle she's alive." Dominic read the chart, his hands shaking with rage. This wasn't just domestic abuse from a drunk boyfriend. This was calculated. Someone knew Sarah had potential. Someone had been keeping her weak on purpose. And the girl? Aris nodded toward Lily. "She's mine," Dominic said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Sarah told me before she passed out." "I didn't need her to tell me," Aris said, pulling a second sheet of paper from under the first. I ran a rapid DNA sequence on the girl when the nurses were cleaning her cuts. Dominic, she's not just yours. Her blood markers are off the charts. She's an Alpha Prime. I've never seen a reading this high in a child. Dominic looked back at Lily. The little girl was now holding a cup of apple juice a nurse had given her, sipping it quietly. An Alpha Prime. A child born with enough power to challenge for the throne one day. A child who had been living in a trailer, starving, while her father sat on a throne of gold. "Does anyone else know?" Dominic asked. "Just me and the lab tech. I silenced the tech," Aris said. "But you know the Council. They have spies everywhere. If they find out you have an illegitimate heir, especially one from a mother they think is human." "Let them find out," Dominic snarled, crumpling the paper in his fist. "Let them come." As if summoned by his anger, the elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged. 3 figures stepped out. It was Councilman Sterling, a man with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. Flanking him were 2 of his personal guards. Sterling was the head of the Traditionalist faction, the group that believed humans were cattle and that the purity of the wolf bloodline was paramount. "Alpha Blackwood," Sterling said, his voice oily and smooth as he walked down the corridor. "We heard there was an incident, a disruption of the council session for a domestic dispute in the slums." Dominic stepped between Sterling and Lily. He crossed his arms, his biceps straining against the fabric of his ruined shirt. "You're a long way from the council chamber, Sterling." "I came out of concern," Sterling lied, his eyes darting to the little girl. He sniffed the air, his nose wrinkling. "And to see this guest you've brought into the royal wing. Surely you aren't using pack resources on a stray human child. The budget committee will be up in arms." "She is not a stray," Dominic said, his voice deadly calm. "And she is not just a guest." Sterling raised an eyebrow. "Oh, then what is she?" "A pet." Dominic moved. He didn't shift, but he moved with such speed that Sterling flinched back. Dominic grabbed Sterling by the tie and slammed him against the wall, lifting him onto his toes. The 2 guards reached for their weapons, but Dominic's eyes flared a brilliant, blinding gold. "Stand down." The command hit them like a physical hammer. The guards dropped to their knees, whining, their wolves forced into submission by the Alpha King. Dominic brought his face inches from Sterling's. "She is my daughter. She is the princess of this pack, and the woman in that room is my mate. If you ever refer to them as strays or pets again, I will mount your head on the city gates. Do you understand?" Sterling's face went pale, gasping for air. "The daughter, but the mother is human." "The mother is the queen," Dominic corrected. He released Sterling, letting the man drop to the floor in a heap. "Now get out of my hospital." Sterling scrambled to his feet, adjusting his tie, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and calculating malice. "The council will require proof. Dominic, you can't just declare heirs. The law of blood." "I am the law," Dominic roared. Sterling retreated, signaling his guards. As the elevator doors closed on them, Dominic knew this was just the beginning. Sterling wouldn't stop. He would dig. He would try to find a way to delegitimize Lily and get rid of Sarah. But they didn't know what Dominic knew. They didn't know about the poison. Someone had orchestrated this. 5 years ago. Sarah hadn't just left. She had been taken out of play, and Dominic was going to find out who did it. Starting with the only lead he had, he turned to Cale, who had been standing silently by the door as a guard. "Go to the holding cells," Dominic ordered. "Wake Gareth up. I have questions." Sarah was dreaming. In the dream, She wasn't in the trailer. She wasn't smelling Gareth's stale beer or feeling the sting of his hand. She was back in the sunlit meadow behind the old diner, the day she told Dominic she was pregnant. It was 5 years ago. The world was brighter then. Dominic looked younger, his face less lined with the burdens of the crown. He was laughing, spinning her around. A baby, he had said, his eyes lighting up with a joy so pure it made her heart ache. Sarah, this is everything. I don't care what the council says. I don't care about the bloodlines. You are my mate. This child is my heir. But your mother, Sarah had whispered, fear gnawing at her. She hates me. Dom, she says I'm polluting the line. My mother doesn't rule this pack, Dominic had sworn, kissing her forehead. I do. Meet me tonight at the bridge. We'll go to the registrar. We'll make it official before I announce it to the pack. Midnight. Don't be late. The dream shifted. The sunlight turned to rain. Sarah was waiting at the bridge. It was midnight, but Dominic didn't come. Instead, a black sedan pulled up. 2 men got out. They wore the royal crest. Dominic isn't coming. Ms. Miller, one of them had said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a letter. It was in Dominic's handwriting. She knew his handwriting, the sharp, jagged loops. Sarah. The letter read, I thought I could do it. I thought I could lower myself to be with a human. But the reality of the crown is too heavy. I cannot have a half-breed child sitting on my throne. Take this money and leave. If you ever return, if you ever try to contact me, I will have you killed. For the sake of what we had, I am sparing your life. Go. The dream Sarah screamed. She screamed until her throat bled. She watched the men shove a bag of cash into her hands and drive away. She ran after them, but she tripped. She fell into the mud. Then, a shadow fell over her. Gareth. He hadn't been a monster then. He was just a mechanic who stopped to help a crying girl on the side of the road. He offered her a ride. He offered her a place to stay. She didn't know he was working for them. Not until it was too late. No, Sarah moaned, tossing her head on the hospital pillow. Dom, why? Sarah. A voice cut through the nightmare. A real voice. Deep. Rumbling. Familiar. Her eyes snapped open. The harsh white light of the hospital room blinded her for a moment. She blinked, her vision clearing. She was in a bed, a soft bed, with crisp sheets that smelled of lavender detergent. Machines beeped rhythmically beside her. And there, sitting in a chair pulled right up to the bedside, was Dominic. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw covered in stubble. He was still wearing the blood-stained dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal his muscular forearms. Sarah gasped, scrambling backward, ignoring the sharp pain in her ribs. The monitor's heart rate spiked. Beep, 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 beep. Get away, she croaked, her voice raspy. Please. I didn't come back. I swear Lily just... She ran away. Don't kill us. Dominic looked like she had slapped him. He stood up, hands raised in surrender. Sarah, stop. Look at me. I'm not going to hurt you. The letter, Sarah cried, tears spilling hot and fast. You said if I came back, you'd kill me. You said you didn't want a half-breed. Dominic froze. What letter? The one you sent? Sarah sobbed, curling into herself. At the bridge, 5 years ago, you sent your men. Dominic's face went from confused to thunderous in a split second. He moved slowly, deliberately, sitting on the edge of the bed. He ignored her flinch and took her hand. Sarah, he said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage, not at her, but for her. I never sent a letter. I waited at that bridge until dawn. I waited in the rain for 3 days. I sent trackers to find you, but your scent just vanished. Sarah stopped crying. She looked at him, searching his face for the lie. But Dominic Blackwood was a terrible liar. His golden eyes were wide open, filled with a pain that mirrored her own. You waited, she whispered. I thought you left me, Dominic said, his thumb stroking her knuckles. I thought you realized you didn't want to be part of this violent world. I thought I wasn't enough for you. They told me. Sarah's breath hitched. 2 men, Royal Guard uniforms. They gave me a letter in your handwriting. They gave me money. And Gareth, Dominic asked darkly. He found me that night. I thought it was luck. But a few months later, when I tried to leave, he laughed. He said, "The lady pays me to keep you here. Sarah, you aren't going anywhere." He kept me in that trailer. He took the money. He made sure I couldn't reach you. The lady, Dominic repeated. The temperature in the room plummeted. I never knew her name, Sarah said. I only heard him on the phone once. He called her Milady. Dominic stood up. He walked to the window, staring out at the rain-slicked city skyline. The pieces were falling into place. The poison to suppress her wolf. The fake letter. The hired jailer in the slums. It had to be someone with access to his handwriting. Someone who could command the Royal Guard. Someone who had the funds to pay off a scumbag like Gareth for 5 years. Beatrice. Dominic whispered the name to the glass. Lady Beatrice was the daughter of Councilman Sterling. She had been Dominic's childhood friend. She had been the one who comforted him after Sarah disappeared. She had been the one pushing for a political marriage between their families for the last 3 years. She was often in his study where she could easily practice his handwriting, and she was the only one who knew about the bridge. He had told her about his plan to propose. Seeking advice, he turned back to Sarah. The look on his face was terrifying, a mask of cold, predatory determination. Sarah, he said, you and Lily are never going back to the Fringe. You are staying here, in the pack house, in my wing. But the council, Sarah worried. I am going to burn the council to the ground if I have to, Dominic vowed. But first, I need you to be brave. I need you to help me catch them. How? Dominic reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. Kyle, he said into the phone, bring Gareth to the interrogation room and call a council meeting, emergency session. Tell them I've found a rogue human who needs to be put on trial. Sarah's eyes widened. Dominic hung up. He looked at Sarah, a dark, dangerous smirk playing on his lips. They think you're a weak, battered human. Sarah, they think you're broken. We're going to let them believe that. We're going to invite the Viper into the room, and we're going to wait for her to strike. He walked back to the bed and kissed her forehead gently. Rest now. Tomorrow, we go to war. The Grand Council chamber was a masterpiece of intimidation. High stone walls, banners of the 12 major families hanging from the rafters, and the obsidian throne sitting high above the pit where the accused stood. Tonight, the room was packed. Word had spread like wildfire. The Alpha King had called an emergency judgment. Lady Beatrice sat in the front row of the observers' gallery, her posture perfect. She wore a dress of emerald silk that hugged her curves, her blonde hair cascading in carefully styled waves. She looked every inch the future queen she believed herself to be. Next to her sat her father, Councilman Sterling, looking smug. They believed Dominic was finally cleaning up his mess. They believed he had found Sarah, realized she was damaged goods living in the slums, and was going to formally exile her to protect his reputation. Dominic sat on the throne. His face was a mask of stone. He wore his ceremonial black furs over a fresh suit. He didn't look at Beatrice. He didn't look at Sterling. "Bring in the accused," Dominic's voice boomed, amplified by the acoustics of the hall. The heavy doors groaned open. Sarah walked in. She wasn't wearing the rags from the trailer. Dominic had her dressed in a simple, elegant white gown that covered her bruises, though the swelling on her face was still visible. She walked with a limp, but her head was high. She had been terrified in the holding room, but Dominic had whispered to her, "Look at me, only at me." So she did. She locked eyes with the man on the throne, ignoring the hundreds of wolves murmuring in the stands. "Silence," Dominic commanded. The room fell dead quiet. "This woman," Dominic gestured to Sarah, "was found within our borders. She has been living in the fringe, unauthorized, for 5 years. She claims a connection to the Alpha Line." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Sterling stood up. "Alpha, with respect. The law is clear. Unauthorized humans in the fringe are to be deported. If she claims a false connection to the throne to gain sympathy, that is a crime punishable by permanent silence." Dominic leaned forward. "And what does the traditionalist faction suggest? Make an example of her," Sterling said smoothly. "Show the pack that no one, not even a former acquaintance, is above the law." Dominic turned his gaze to Beatrice. "And you, Lady Beatrice, you were once a friend to the crown. What is your counsel?" Beatrice stood gracefully. She offered a sad, pitying smile to Sarah. "It breaks my heart. Dominic, truly. But a king cannot be weak. If she has been living in the slums with criminals, she is likely compromised. Drug addiction, disease. It is a mercy to send her away, or end her suffering." Sarah trembled, her hands clenching the fabric of her dress. The cruelty was suffocating. "Compromised," Dominic repeated the word, tasting it. "Interesting choice of words. You seem to know a lot about her living conditions." "Beatrice." Beatrice didn't falter. "I only assume, based on the reports of the fringe." "Bring in the witness," Dominic roared suddenly. The side doors opened. 2 guards dragged a man into the center of the room. It was Gareth. He looked worse than Sarah. His face was a ruin of purple and black from his interrogation with Kyle. He was weeping openly. Beatrice's perfect mask slipped. Her skin went the color of chalk. Sterling froze. "Do you know this man, Lady Beatrice?" Dominic asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low growl. Of course not," Beatrice stammered, her hand going to her throat. "He is some filth from the slums." Dominic looked at Gareth. "Speak, loudly, or I let Kale have another 10 minutes with you." Gareth collapsed to his knees, looking frantically at Beatrice. She paid me! She paid me!" The crowd gasped. "Who paid you?" Dominic demanded. "The lady." Gareth pointed a shaking, bloodied finger at Beatrice. 5 years ago, she found me at the roadside. She gave me 10 grand in cash. She said, "Keep the bitch in the trailer. Make sure she stays broken. Make sure she never calls the castle." Then she sent me checks. Every month I have the deposit slips. They're signed by her. Pandemonium erupted. The wolves in the stands were on their feet, shouting. Betrayal of the Alpha was treason. Treason was death. Sterling turned on his daughter, his eyes wide. "Beatrice, You didn't cover your tracks." Aye. Beatrice was hyperventilating. She looked at Dominic and saw the murder in his eyes. She realized the trap had snapped shut. "You poisoned my mate." Dominic stood up, descending the steps of the throne. Each step was heavy, shaking the floor. "You hired a man to beat her, to starve her, to keep her from me." "I did it for the pack," Beatrice shrieked, her facade crumbling into hysteria. "She is a human. She is weak. She would have ruined your bloodline." "Dominic, I saved you." "You didn't save me." Dominic stopped in front of Sarah, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "You tried to destroy the most powerful bloodline this pack has ever seen." He looked at the guards. "Seize them. Both of them." "No." Beatrice screamed. She didn't run. She knew she couldn't outrun the Alpha. Instead, she did something desperate. She reached into the folds of her silk dress and pulled out a sleek, silver-plated pistol. But she didn't aim it at Dominic. She knew his reflexes were too fast. She aimed it at Sarah. "If I can't have you," Beatrice snarled, her eyes manic. "No one can." Time seemed to warp. Dominic was faster than any wolf in the room. But he was standing behind Sarah, his hand on her shoulder. To shield her, he had to step in front. He moved. Beatrice fired. Bang! The sound was deafening in the stone chamber. Dominic grunted, his body jerking as the silver bullet meant for Sarah's heart slammed into his shoulder. Silver burned shifters like acid. He roared, falling to one knee, the impact spinning him around. "Dom!" Sarah screamed, dropping to catch him. "Kill them!" Sterling shouted to his personal guards, realizing it was now a coup or death. "Kill the Alpha. Taking the throne is our only chance." Chaos consumed the room. Sterling's traitorous guards drew weapons and clashed with the royal enforcers. The audience scattered in panic. Beatrice stood there, the gun smoking, her eyes wide with madness. She saw Dominic down. She saw Sarah defenseless. "Die, you human trash!" Beatrice screamed, leveling the gun again for a kill shot. Sarah looked at the gun. She looked at Dominic, bleeding black blood onto the white stone, groaning as the silver spread through his veins. She thought of Lily, safe in the tower, waiting for her mother. Fear evaporated. In its place, something ancient, hot and violent exploded in Sarah's chest. "Doctor," Aris had said the poison was clearing. He had said the suppressants were gone. The stress of the last 24 hours, the threat to her mate, the threat to her pup, it was the catalyst. Sarah didn't scream. She growled. It wasn't a human sound. It was a deep, resonant vibration that shook the teeth of everyone nearby. Beatrice hesitated, her finger trembling on the trigger. "What?" Sarah's back arched. The sound of snapping bones echoed wet and loud. But Sarah didn't cry out in pain. She embraced it. White fur burst through the skin of her arms. Her jaw elongated with a sickening crack. Her violet eyes, usually so soft, began to glow with a blinding, incandescent white light. "Impossible," Sterling gasped, watching from where he was fighting Kale. "A white wolf. They've been extinct for centuries." The white wolf was a legend, the purest form of shifter, born only to bring balance in times of great chaos. Sarah wasn't just a latent wolf. She was an apex predator, suppressed by poison. Beatrice fired again. Bang! Sarah didn't dodge. She moved forward. Her transforming hand, now a massive paw, tipped with razor-sharp claws, swatted the bullet out of the air. Beatrice shrieked, dropping the gun. She turned to run, but it was too late. With a final, earth-shattering howl that forced every wolf in the room to cover their ears. Sarah completed the shift. She stood on 4 legs, massive, pristine white, radiating an aura of power that rivaled Dominic's. She lunged. She didn't kill Beatrice. That would be too easy. She pinned Beatrice to the floor, her massive jaws clamping around the woman's arm, the arm that had held the gun. Crunch. Beatrice's scream was blood-curdling. Sarah tossed her aside like a rag doll and turned toward Sterling. The traitorous councilman dropped his sword. He fell to his knees, pissing himself in terror. "Mercy, Queen! Mercy!" The fighting stopped. The guards froze. Everyone stared at the White Wolf, standing over the fallen Alpha King. Sarah lowered her massive head and nudged Dominic's cheek. He was pale, sweating, the silver poison working fast. She whined, a high-pitched sound of distress. She licked the wound on his shoulder. A miracle happened. Where the White Wolf's saliva touched the wound, the black, bubbling burn of the silver stopped. The steam hissed and vanished. The wound began to knit together before their eyes. The healing saliva of the White Wolf. Another legend come true. Dominic gasped, air rushing back into his lungs. His golden eyes fluttered open. He looked up and saw the magnificent creature standing over him. He didn't need to ask. He knew. "Sarah," he whispered. Sarah sat back on her haunches and threw her head back, letting out a howl of victory. Slowly, one by one, the wolves in the room dropped to their knees. Not out of fear, but out of reverence. Even Kyle, even the traitors. They weren't just bowing to the Alpha King anymore. They were bowing to the Luna, the White Queen. Dominic struggled to his feet, his shoulder fully healed. He placed a hand on Sarah's thick fur. "Arrest Sterling," Dominic ordered, his voice returning to its commanding strength. "Lock Beatrice in the dungeons, and fetch the princess." He looked at the crowd, his hand buried in the fur of the woman he loved. "Let it be known," Dominic announced. "The Blackwood Pack has a queen, and she is no human." The silence in the council chamber following the battle was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive. It was the silence of a world shifting on its axis. Sarah's massive white wolf form wavered. The adrenaline that had fueled her transformation, the first shift of her entire life, was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. She swayed, her paws slipping on the stone floor. "I've got you," Dominic murmured. He was already moving, shedding his heavy, ceremonial fur cloak. As Sarah's form shrank, bones reshaping and fur retracting, Dominic wrapped the cloak around her, shielding her nakedness from the hundreds of eyes in the room. He scooped her up into his arms, holding her against his healed shoulder. "The Queen needs rest," Dominic announced to the room. His voice was no longer filled with rage. It was filled with a quiet, terrifying authority. "Clear the room. Kyle, secure the prisoners. If they try to speak, silence them." "Yes, Alpha." Kyle bowed low, his eyes filled with a newfound respect for the woman in Dominic's arms. Dominic carried Sarah out of the chamber, not toward the hospital wing, but toward the royal suite, the master chambers that had sat empty of a Luna for 5 long years. As he walked down the grand hallway, the elevator doors at the far end slid open. "Mummy!" The high-pitched scream echoed off the marble walls. Lily broke free from a nurse's grip and sprinted down the hall. Her little legs pumped furiously, her oversized rain boots clumping against the floor. Dominic dropped to one knee, still holding Sarah, bringing them down to Lily's level. Sarah groggily opened her eyes. The transformation had drained her, but the sound of her daughter's voice was the ultimate stimulant. She shifted in the furs, reaching out a hand. "Lilybug," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse. Lily didn't care about the blood on the floor or the guards. She crashed into them, wrapping her tiny arms around Dominic's neck and burying her face in Sarah's hair. "The nurse said you turned into a big dog," Lily sobbed. "She said you ate the bad lady." Sarah let out a weak, watery laugh. "I didn't eat her, baby. I just gave her a time out." Dominic buried his face in the crook of Lily's neck, inhaling the scent of his family. For the first time in 5 years, the hole in his chest was gone. It was filled. "Did you see?" "Lily," Dominic whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Mummy isn't just a queen. She's a warrior." Lily pulled back, wiping her nose. She looked at Dominic, then at Sarah. Her violet eyes, so like her mother's, sparkled with a sudden, fierce intensity. "When I grow up," Lily declared, "I'm going to be a wolf too, and I'm going to bite anyone who hurts us." Dominic chuckled, a deep rumble that vibrated through Sarah's tired body. "I have no doubt you will. Princess, but for now, let's go home." 1 month later, the preparation for the coronation of the White Queen was the most talked about event in the history of the shifter world. Alphas from Europe, Asia, and South America flew in on private jets. The media, both human and shifter, were in a frenzy. The story had leaked, orchestrated carefully by Dominic's new press team. The narrative was perfect. The lost love, the hidden heir, the miraculous return. The Cinderella wolf, they called her. But inside the royal suite, Sarah wasn't feeling like Cinderella. She was feeling nauseous. "I can't wear this," Sarah said, staring at herself in the floor-length mirror. "Dom, it costs more than the trailer park I lived in." She was wearing a gown made of crushed white velvet and silver lace, embroidered with thousands of tiny diamonds that caught the light like stars. It was heavy, regal, and undeniably beautiful. Dominic walked up behind her. He was dressed in his formal military dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest. He placed his hands on her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You earned every diamond on that dress, Sarah," he said softly. "You survived hell. You protected our daughter. You saved my life. You are not just wearing a costume. You are wearing your armor." Sarah leaned back against him. The bruises were gone. The malnutrition was gone. Good food, rest, and the bond with her mate had restored her. She glowed with health. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of the wolves. I'm scared I'll wake up. I'm scared I'm still on the floor of that trailer, and this is just a fever dream." Dominic turned her around. He took her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "This is real," he promised. "Gareth is in Blackgate Prison, serving a life sentence in solitary confinement. Beatrice and Sterling have been exiled to the desolate lands in the north, stripped of their titles and their wealth. They can never hurt you again." He kissed her, deep and slow, pouring all his devotion into the contact. When he pulled away, his eyes were burning gold. "And if anyone ever tries to take this away from you again," he growled, "they will not face the Alpha King. They will face the husband, and that is a far more dangerous man." A knock came at the door. "Enter," Dominic commanded. The door opened and Lily walked in. Or rather, she marched in. She was wearing a miniature version of Sarah's dress, her unruly hair tamed into a complex braid woven with white flowers. She looked like a porcelain doll, but she carried herself like a general. "Daddy, come on," Lily said, tapping her foot. "The people are waiting. I want to wear my tiara." Dominic laughed, the tension in the room breaking. "You heard the princess. We shouldn't keep her waiting." The grand ballroom was a sea of colors and scents. Thousands of wolves stood in silence as the heavy doors opened, when Dominic and Sarah walked down the aisle, hand in hand, with Lily walking proudly in front of them, scattering white petals. The room didn't just clap, they howled. It was a sound of acceptance, a sound of unity. They reached the dais where the High Priestess stood, holding the lunar crown, a delicate band of platinum and moonstone. Dominic stepped back, allowing Sarah to stand alone in the center of the stage. "Sarah Miller," the High Priestess intoned, her voice ancient and raspy. "You have walked through fire and returned with ice. You have shown the strength of the White Wolf. Do you swear to protect this pack, to guide them with wisdom and mercy?" "I do," Sarah said, her voice clear and strong. "Do you swear to stand beside your Alpha, not behind him, as his equal in all things?" Sarah looked at Dominic. He was watching her with a look of such intense pride it took her breath away. "I do." She smiled. "Then I crown you." The priestess placed the heavy weight on Sarah's head. "Luna Sarah of the Blackwood Pack, the White Queen." The applause was deafening. Dominic stepped forward and took her hand, raising it high in the air. "Long live the Queen," he roared. "Long live the Queen," the crowd chanted back. Lily, deciding she had been left out of the spotlight for too long, tugged on Dominic's pant leg. He scooped her up with one arm, holding her between them. The camera flashes went off, capturing the image that would hang in the castle for generations. The fierce Alpha King, the radiant White Queen, and the violet-eyed child who would one day rule them all. Later that night, after the parties had died down, and Lily was asleep, guarded by Cale himself, who had taken a fierce liking to the little boss, Dominic found Sarah on the balcony. The rain had stopped. The moon was full, bathing the sprawling estate in silver light. Sarah was leaning against the railing, still wearing her crown. She looked out at the city lights, the city that was now hers to protect. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was thinking about the bridge," Sarah said softly. "The day I waited for you in the rain." Dominic stiffened. "Sarah, Shh." She turned in his arms to face him. "I was thinking that, if I hadn't waited, if I hadn't gone through that pain, I might not be strong enough to be who I am today. I hate what they did to us, but I love who we became." She reached up and straightened his collar. "We aren't the same kids who fell in love in a diner. Dom, we're scarred. We're broken in places. But we fit together better now." Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "You are the strongest person I know. I spent 5 years being a king, but I didn't know how to be a man until I got you back." "You have me," Sarah whispered. "Always." "And you have me," Dominic vowed, "from now until the stars burn out." He kissed her under the light of the moon, a seal on a promise that had survived lies, poison, and time itself. The Alpha had found his mate. The wolf had found her pack, and for the first time in a long, long time, the Blackwood estate wasn't just a castle. It was a home. And that is the incredible story of how a little girl in a pink dress saved her mother and changed the fate of a kingdom. It's a story that reminds us that true power isn't about claws or crowns. It's about the courage to speak up, even when you're small, and the resilience to keep fighting, even when the world tries to break you. Dominic and Sarah proved that love is the only force stronger than hate, and that sometimes the biggest monsters are defeated by the smallest acts of bravery. Wow. What a roller coaster of emotions, I have to admit. I teared up when Sarah finally shifted to protect her family. What did you think of the White Wolf twist? And honestly, what would you have done if you were in Dominic's shoes when he found out about the betrayal. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want more intense romances and dramatic twists, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next part of our storytelling saga. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.